generally people are usually, I blame myself for everything and everything's my fault and I am the reason that this happened or didn't happen or whatever, or they're the opposite where they're like, it's your fault and they're pointing fingers all the time. They don't take responsibility. And my job a lot of the time when I'm working with a patient or a client or whatever you want to call them, they like, it's me bringing them towards the middle, right? Like, that's not your fault. This is like, this is what you can control. This is what you cannot, right?
First episode of the Status Joe podcast.
I am
pumped to
so
have you.
excited to be here.
It's also good to have you back in Nashville because you bailed on me and went to Atlanta.
I know. I bailed on a lot of people. I feel bad. It's interesting because a lot of the community I had here moved right when I did. So it's like, I feel like Nashville is just like a whole different place to me now.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's one of those towns too that's really based on the people you know, right? So just get a little bit closer to the mic. But did y'all get into anything fun this weekend?
My friend, a few people who used to live in Nashville, that community that I know you through, kind of, sort of. We all kind of, a few people came into town, so we were like all doing that, and it's my birthday in 2 weeks, so they were like celebrating my birthday tonight.
Awesome.
I'm doing like a whole dinner,
So yeah, a lot of people don't probably know that you and I are good friends. We used to work together.
Yes.
And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I think post you and I working together, you took a really cool path. So maybe you could just kind of tell people like what you've been up to the last, is it a year, 8 months?
It's been since March, end of March.
Okay.
I started kind of doing my own thing. I would say April probably.
Okay.
So I have, my career path has been really interesting, but I'm a therapist by trade, so I went to grad school for therapy.
Right.
And from there, I was working in addiction in my internship. So and I've always worked in research settings. So I went from being in school for not addiction, but therapy. And then the company I was interning with hired me to be a researcher and a therapist, and they're based in Nashville. So that's what moved me here. And then that company kind of went sideways, and then I kind of had to pivot, and I got my job at NaviHealth, which was completely different than what I had been doing. More or less like...
Was that just like through a recruiter or... Yeah.
It actually was crazy because essentially my boss at the time at my old company was telling me like, you probably need to look for a new job because they got a new CEO, and he was like kind of kicking people out and bringing other people in, and they were going to get rid of the entire research department essentially is what she alluded to. And so I was like, all right. And a person just randomly reached out to me about this job at NaviHealth, and it aligned perfectly. Like I put my 2 weeks in, and the last day of my job at Foundations, my last company, was the day that my entire team got laid off.
Whoa.
Which was crazy. Like
that's
the timing,
nuts.
like it was insane. So I ended up they kind of like, it was awesome. They ended up giving me some like severance, even though I like quit, Right. So.
And how long after that did you start?
I literally started at NaviHealth. I had no time off. I went from Friday was my last day and the last day of my entire team.
Right.
And then Monday I started at NaviHealth.
And for people who don't know, NaviHealth is a healthcare company based in Nashville.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with what you were doing.
The only overlap was the fact that it was healthcare.
Right.
And I was doing analytics.
It's totally different.
Yeah. I was doing the only comparison was like the mathematical component of both jobs. Like I was doing a lot of analytical work at, obviously doing research, like, a lot of like math and that sort of a thing, doing like the back end stuff. So that was literally the only comparison between the two jobs. So I learned a ton at NaviHealth, and it, a lot of it is relevant, but at the same time, it was like skills. Some of the things I learned are just not relevant to what I wanted to do now. So it was kind of
So how did you go from 9 to 5 corporate soldier to I'm going to up and quit and start my own company? And tell us a little bit about the company.
So I have a confession to make.
Okay.
I was actually debating whether I wanted to tell you this before we talked on those podcasts.
Oh boy.
yeah. So I actually, fun fact, I talked about you in therapy, my own therapy. Not just you and a few other people. So I actually...
News to me.
I know. So I actually got laid off from Napa Health.
Okay.
So I wouldn't call it, I don't know what to call it. Every time I say laid off, people are like, you didn't get laid off. They essentially eliminated my position and were like, we would love for you to apply to another position at Napa Health. Like,
right.
But your position is ending, like, feel free, and you have 30 days until it ends, right? So I was in, mind you, I did not like my job, like
right.
For the reasons I just discussed. It was not for me. I learned a ton. I had an incredible boss, and then I didn't. So because she moved positions. So yeah, essentially it was kind of like, okay, I have an opportunity. I've been thinking about doing my own thing for so long. Why don't I just do it? And it was kind of like fate kind of kicked me in the ass and was like, all right, you need to do it now. Yeah. But the reason, like, you're the only, you and Spencer, our other friend, who was also at Napa Health,
right.
are the only two people that, like, on our volleyball team that didn't know that I got laid off. Like, I was afraid to tell you two.
Why is that?
Because both of you are so, like, you're Enneagram 3s, right? Like,
right.
Yeah,
so explain why don't we just dive in then?
Yeah, like, both of you are, like, very serious about work, and, like, you're very driven, and, like, you're image driven, which is not a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But I was in such a vulnerable place. I had just broken my wrist. I literally, like, 2 days after my surgery is when I literally got laid off. It was horrifying for me. And awful. I hated my job. I was trying my best to, like, get into, when I was working there, after all of the change up, we got bought by Optum. Everything like changed at work, and I was, like, trying to find work and, like, get involved and do stuff, and it just, like, wasn't working out, and I didn't have good guidance from the person who was managing me and all this stuff. So anyway, I was just, like, super, super insecure about the fact that I had gotten laid off, and I don't know if I could handle someone giving me, like, a weird look about it. You know what I mean? Like, and all I needed was, like, encouragement and, like, happy people to be like, yay, like, go you. And I was, like, so afraid of you and him.
Man, that makes me feel bad.
I know. Well,
I think it's awesome what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think what you're doing, a lot of people that I work with, like, I mean, you got forced into it somewhat, but a lot of people want to do and don't have the balls to do it, quite frankly. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah. So I kind of got forced into it, but I also, I do want to give myself credit in the sense that, like, I did have an option to stay or take another corporate job. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Have more of a, I guess, like, some sort of an income that was known, right? Like, there's so much unknown in having your own company. Yeah. So I
have a friend who, similar situation, got laid off, and he was, like, in finance and ended up taking, like, I think 3 or 4 months off, and, like, completely pivoted into another field and, like, now loves it. So in a way, there's a lot of things I feel like that suck at the time that end up being silver linings like that, whether it's getting laid off or fired or going through a rough relationship and then breaking it off or getting dumped. Yeah. So
it was definitely one of those things where it's like, I was talking about quitting my job and doing whether getting another job or doing my own thing for so long that it was like,
what's it like when you have that conversation? How does that work? Do they bring you into the office?
When I got laid off?
Yeah.
No, it was a Zoom call.
Because it was COVID?
Yeah, and my boss at the time hadn't even, like, asked me about, like, how is your wrist? Like, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. He literally asked me about that and then laid me off.
Right.
Like, in the same phone call. I think that's
why a lot of people
in front of HR.
I think that's why, too, particularly in our generation, there's not the loyalty to corporations that you see. Like, if you look at older generations, like my dad, for instance, got out of the Navy, worked for the same company for like 31 years and then retired, which you just do not see anymore. And I think, like, it probably stems back to 2008 when you look at the financial crisis. You have all these people who have had these jobs for 20 years, shit goes south, and then bam, they get laid off.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that that's kind of
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's, I don't know. It's this whole idea that people, I feel like we just live in a more, maybe it's a selfish society now is one way to put it. Like we're just very self-serving, and people, obviously some people care about like the mission of the company or the work that they're doing, but at the end of the day, like I feel like people are driven by other means more than that, right? Which kind of makes sense why they are like, okay, well, this isn't serving me as much anymore, I'm leaving.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely. Yeah, and there's no more like, let's wait until my boss retires or gets promoted until I can take his job.
Right.
If some recruiter emails you or sends you a thing on LinkedIn for a better job with a 25% pay raise, it's kind of like, well, why am I going to...
Right. There's more visibility to like other options.
There is, yeah. It's a lot easier for people to get in touch with you. Okay, so that happens. You got on your own.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Horrifying. I'm still figuring it out. I think that the scariest thing for starting your own company, and I've heard so many people say like, just do it, like keep going.
And explain to people what your company is.
So it's called Mindful Meetups. And essentially I'm a part-time therapist, part-time researcher. So, I'm trying to create a mental health community online, essentially. Not only to just like bring in clients, but I think that those type of topics, there's some people on Instagram and on TikTok and stuff like that really will post things that make me see or feel more sane or see things from a different perspective.
What would be an example of that?
So there's a woman who, her name is, I don't know her name, but she is like probably the most famous, I would say, Instagram psychologist. Her name is her Instagram is The Holistic Psychologist. And she posts a lot of stuff about like childhood trauma and like all these certain topics, and kind of gives you information and makes you feel more sane about certain things like that, where, you know, a lot of people can't afford to go to therapy or have the type of conversations that you need to have or feel understood or have the education around mental health. And so she kind of puts that out there and makes people, like, creates this environment where everyone has not only an opportunity to learn, but be like, oh my gosh, that's me, or wow, like there's something so powerful when you read something that resonates with you and you're like, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense.
You know, that is interesting too. I feel like as mental health has become less of a general stigma within society, and you kind of couple that with what's gone on with social media, i.e. how easy it is to get in touch with people, I feel like you see this mass dissemination of free information about mental health. And that I feel like that is really
interesting way to put it.
Right?
Free information.
It is, right? Yeah. You can go on YouTube or TikTok, and I guess essentially you're the product there, right?
Right.
As the end user. But it's an unbelievable way for people to get access to something that you might have had to pay, I don't know, $200 an hour to a clinician to go see in the past.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating to me. And that's something that I'm going to actually, my next project within Mindful Meetups is I want to create some sort of because the number one question that I get all the time from my friends, my people I meet who ask me about, you know, what I do, that sort of a thing, is why would I need to go to therapy? Like what would I talk about? Like, I don't understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, actually, if you could I feel like there is a misconception for people around what they're actually doing in there.
Yeah.
Like you see on the movies, like the guy laying on the couch and or girl pouring out their emotions.
Have you ever been to therapy?
I went to one session, but never really. So I don't have a great understanding of it. Okay. But speaking to you and people I know who have been, it feels like there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So kind of, what is the goal? What's the purpose of it? I
think it depends on the person. I know that's not the best way to, that's probably not what you want to hear. But it really is, it's like the idea behind it. It's about a lot of the research shows that at the end of the day, because there's all these different counseling theories and things. At the end of the day, it's about the relationship between you and your therapist. That's the most important piece of therapy, right? So it's to have a vulnerable, real relationship with somebody who is unbiased and cares about your well-being and knows you and listens. And so like that is like point blank period the most important piece that has been proven in therapy. But like there's a lot of people most people go to therapy because they're in a crisis, right? Like whether it's like I can't stop drinking, or I have a problem with my husband, or I have crippling anxiety. Do
you think there's an avenue for people to go preventatively?
What do you mean?
So if you look at like the work we were doing at NaviHealth, right? A lot of it was around, a lot of what is going on in the healthcare field, right, is looking at the healthcare industry, like social determinants of health, right, which is saying like, how does a person's economic situation or their food insecurity or their ability to have transportation to the doctor's office impact their health needs? And instead of somebody getting sick and then us treating them, how can we do things in advance to prevent them from ever getting to this stage?
I see what you're saying.
Do you think therapy should be, I understand there's definitely an avenue for it when you're in the crisis. Should people be doing things that you learn in therapy just in their day-to-day life to improve it? Or should they wait until, hey, I'm drinking every day, or I have crippling anxiety and can't get out of bed and I'm depressed?
Yeah. Well, the type of person who is in therapy who has a crisis, right? They're like in an acute phase of whatever's going on with them.
Right.
That's usually when people show up to therapy, right? But from what you're saying, like I think everybody should be in therapy in some sort of a manner, because we only can see ourselves through our own eyes, right? Like, and we ask so many of our friends, our family, or people in our life how we should respond to things all the time, right? Like, I don't know what to do. What do you think I should do? I don't know why I'm acting like this. Why do I feel this way?
They're not really a third party.
Yeah, and it's not particularly fair all the time that we put that on people. But I think that the idea, like the goal of therapy beyond the relationship with your therapist, like the actual goal is to understand your patterns, right? Understand your subconscious, right? Like my brain goes in this direction and I don't really understand why it does that, but being able to recognize that that's happening,
right,
and be logical and be rational about my irrational thoughts, right? So like, for example, for me, let me think of like something that I work on in therapy. So I have a very interesting relationship with my father. And so I realized that through therapy, my relationships with men are so specifically oriented around healing the relationship with my father, right?
Right.
And I am attracted to certain men because they remind me of my father, and that in turn makes me want to kind of rewrite that relationship through my relationship with men. And so it's kind of like this thing where if I didn't sit down and think about this and talk about it and have someone point out these consistencies in my relationships, and like,
yeah. So how, when you went into therapy, or when a client comes to see you, what process are you going through to kind of take them through this journey to get from not knowing or understanding their subconscious to being able to elaborate like what you just elaborated to me? Like somebody comes in, you've never met them, they sit down. Where do you go?
I said, when people come to or sign up for therapy or start therapy, 99% of the time it's like,
this is a problem.
Yeah, this is the problem. So I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody comes to me and they're like, I am so anxious about what I eat all the time. Which is like, I don't have this person doesn't quote unquote have an eating disorder, but their obsession with what they eat, how much they eat, counting calories, needing to work out a certain amount every day, like it's debilitating for their life, right? And so they want to do something about that. Well, we could sit there and be very tactile and be like, okay, like I need you to just, one day a week, let's not count calories, right? And just see how you feel. Like you could do these very specific things to try and like get them out of that habit. Or you can say, okay, what about your identity is so wrapped up in your body image? what about your, like, what taught you that the way that you look is the most important thing in the world, right? Like, who told you that? And usually it comes down to, like, mom or dad were really self-conscious about their bodies, and then they made comments about me gaining weight, and then I realized that that was such an important thing, and I now think about that all the time, right? And so being able to dig into, like, the very specifics of where is that coming from, right? And then when you work with somebody long enough, you realize these patterns that,
like, they keep bringing them up, or?
like for instance, that at the end of the day, that's about control, right? That I want to be able to control how people view me. I want to be able to control myself.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah, like, I want to be able to, like, if I, like, being a good person or being loved or whatever is associated with the way that I look. Like, that is kind of like the way that they are viewing the world. And so if I can control how I looked, I can control who loves me, and that I will be loved. That will be confirmed, right? So it's a control, it's a means of controlling something you're afraid of, right?
Right.
Which I don't talk about anything else more than control. Like, everything that I talk about in therapy with people and in my own therapy is about, I am afraid of losing control of this, like, or this is why I want to control this.
Are most of people's issues, and might be a loaded question, are most of people's issues driven from fears that then lead them to want to control things in sometimes unhealthy ways? Or is that that too broad?
What do you mean?
Well, like, if I'm an alcoholic, is it because maybe
as I take my sip.
Yeah, as we take our sips of whiskey, if I'm an alcoholic, maybe, like, I've heard people say, I feel like people like me better when I'm, like, drinking because I'm funnier, I'm looser, or I've heard alcoholics say this. And so I started drinking more because I was looser and I thought people liked me when I was funny. And then I couldn't quit because, like, I'll give you an example. Jason Isabel, who's a really incredible singer-songwriter, he was an alcoholic, and he said in an interview that he was terrified when he quit drinking that he might not be able to write good songs anymore.
Man.
So he has, like, a whole song
about. I have a client that literally tells me that, has told me that.
So is that, how much is control driving bad, or the desire to control how people feel about you and your image driving people's actions? It might be an impossible question.
No, I see what you're saying. So this is a very loaded question because alcoholism or addiction in general has its own voice, right? So the reality is not that, oh, I drink because it makes me feel like people like me more. I drink because people like me more when I'm drunk, right? Like, which is what you just said. The reality, that's what the that's what the addiction says to you. Keep drinking because people like you more when you're drunk. But the reality is, I want to keep drinking because it's my medicine. Like, it's my coping mechanism for, like, my anxiety, my depression, whatever is really going on, right? Like, so being able to justify the drinking with, oh, people like me, like, I'm a better version of myself when I do this, is literally the explanation that your mind is telling you to keep you drinking. That's literally what addiction is. Okay. But the reality behind that is you really like drinking because alcohol is literally one of your best friends. Like, you've created this wiring in your head that, okay, I have anxiety, or I don't feel good about myself, or I hate myself, or whatever, and I drink to cope with that, right?
Yeah.
I think is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I think so. Those are all really interesting points. So how much, is there a typical breakdown? Like, what are you treating the most? I know you said you specialized in addiction. Is that most of what you're seeing? Or are you seeing a lot of anxiety and depression?
Yeah, I don't really, I think I don't really specialize in anything. I think I have the most experience in addiction. Okay. Because I am also, like, the child of an alcoholic. I have alcoholism runs rampant in my family. So yeah.
How much, well, maybe we'll pivot a little bit here, because I feel like you've talked about your family growing up. Mm-hmm. How much of this is, I think this is the classic question that you love. Yeah, I see you smiling. How much of this is genetics? This is how I was born.
Yeah.
If you were to put me in any situation, this is how I'd be versus the environment, right? This is a classic nature versus nurture. And I think you told me once that you used to think everything was nurture. Yeah. And that you've kind of changed your tune on this over the years.
I would say like, and this is kind of my example, my argument every time this topic comes up. It's really stupid to think it's only one or the other. I think it's like science has proven that it's not, right? Mm-hmm. But it's a really interesting, especially on the topic of addiction in general, like using addiction as an example for this, like, is it the chicken or the egg, right? Like, did I grow up watching my parent drink to cope with things, and then I, learned at a very young age, okay, like I wired in my head, when you're in a bad mood, you have a glass of wine. When you have a bad day, you drink, right? Or is it this, connection within like the genetic piece of like, oh, like this is kind of weird and wonky in my parents and their parents, and it's been passed down genetically. So it's I don't think we'll ever know what it is, but the reason that I do the work that I do is because we can't change genetics, right? We can't do anything about the fact that I was born with an alcoholic tendency, right? Right. We can do the work when it comes to the nurture piece, right? Like, oh, I have trauma and therefore, I'm very attracted to not being sober, right? Why is that? What was my trauma? Why does it keep coming up? Like all of these things, like going back to control, like what can I control? What can I not control? And genetics, you can't control. So, being able to blame it on that or not, I think a lot of people lean heavily on the genetics piece as an excuse to not do something about it, right? Like, oh, I'm, the child of an alcoholic, so therefore, like, I'm going to be, and that's just my fate, and that's just how it is, right? As opposed to being like, okay, I went through this thing, and it made me really attracted to this substance. Why is that? How do I find a better coping mechanism? How do I change that? How do I control this, right? So, yeah, I think that it's both. It's absolutely both, but I focus so heavily on the nurture piece, because that's all I can, like, you know what I mean? Like it's like this existential, like the existential piece of it, like, that's all you can do. Like you can't do anything about genetics.
So when you're focusing on this and somebody comes in to see you, does the work that they do stop at the door to your office, proverbial door, since you're seeing people online? Mm-hmm. Or do they need to continue practicing all these things and thinking about it when they go home? Like, how much of it is 24/7 work versus what you're actually learning with the clinician or with you?
I mean, the way that I operate, like, I always give like homework to people, and I make people do more work, because like an hour a week is great, but that's not going to change your mindset on life, or it's not going to change your patterns and your habits and that sort of a thing. So it's definitely way more than that. People who come to therapy and they're not ready to do work, it's like really hard to work with people like that. Like,
so you have to want
to change.
You have to want to change. Is that like the baseline for even coming in? If you don't want to change, there's
I wouldn't say change. You have to want to get to know yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you have to have a desire to be like, I don't understand myself and I want to better, right? Because that's literally the point, if you're kind of like, tell me what to do. Like, I love when people are like, so what should I do? I'm like, no. That's not my job. Like, I'm not here to tell you what to do or how to live your life or how to make decisions or how to talk to this person or whatever. Like, I'm here to help you understand why you're doing what you're doing, and how to, if you don't like what you're doing, why are you doing that?
Are you giving them I heard someone describe it once as, that in therapy, one of the reasons you're going is because you don't have the tools to solve the problems that you need to solve, and that what it's really doing is giving you those tools. Is that a good way to think about it? Like, I need a wrench to solve this problem, right? And I only have a hammer and a tape measure. Mm-hmm. Is that?
Yeah, I would say it's like that person is helping you build the wrench or make you realize that maybe you don't actually need a wrench. Maybe you can do it with what you have, but you have to recognize that, you know? I would say like being able to see things from the perspective of some outside party is like doing that. You're able to see like, okay, like this wrench works, but have you considered this hammer and this nail instead, you know, like, and you're so focused on, I need the wrench. You're not realizing like, oh, I could use these other two things. And it would be, you know, it might be a little bit harder or more confusing, but it's a possibility. I think it's like learning what tools you do have, learning how to use things that you didn't realize that you have, like as far as like empowering people, being able to help people become more resilient, realize how strong they are, realize also justify and validate what people have been through, right? Like,
yeah. It's crazy because you don't have to talk to somebody for very long or get very deep to realize that everybody's kind of been through some shit at one time or another, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm always amazed. It doesn't take long to get into that conversation where, I mean, almost everybody, you know, knows somebody that's sick or that had something go wrong when they were in high school, they got bullied, or maybe they didn't.
Oh yeah.
They got rejected by girls. And so, I want to kind of change topics on you a little bit, if that's okay. I think we're in a really interesting time right now, and especially with COVID and social media. And I really think social media, like people underestimate that technology. And when I'm talking about social media, like I include dating sites on that. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was hookup culture.
Okay.
And I think I've kind of done a lot of research on this, and it's really interesting because you can kind of trace it back like all the way to the 60s. Yeah. Really to the invention of the birth control pill, right? Where before, 1963 or whenever the birth control pill comes out, the rule in society is don't have sex till you're married. Right. Now, is that always followed? No. But there was definitely much more I think we can agree that there was much more of a stigma around it. And then you kind of have this movement in the 60s of, free love. Women for the first time are kind of freed from unwanted pregnancies for the most part. Sure. I'm recently single and entering kind of the dating scene after 2 or 3 years. And it's fascinating to me kind of how shallow everything is. Especially when you get on like dating sites like Hinge or Bumble. Yeah. I'd just love to hear your thoughts on, one, what do you think about that? Two, is that something you see in your practice? Is it making people depressed, less happy? What do you think about that?
Well, okay.
I'm throwing the hard ones at you.
No. I love it. I love talking about this topic. I'm like, dating for me is like, do as I say, not as I do. Because that's a whole nother
As it is for, I think, everybody else on the planet, right?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. It's just like, I think so when you asked me about, like, when you kind of told me that this might come up, like I was writing notes about it and kind of going back to this idea of like, we are in a very selfish society, right? Mm-hmm. So especially with just going back to the idea of social media being, it's all about, look at me, this is me being great, this is me, like, tell me I'm pretty, tell me I look good, tell me, like, praise me, but I'm only going to show you the good parts, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's shallow. That's the definition
of concocting. And I didn't have any social media for a long time. And I've just gotten back, and it's very addicting. First of all,
it's dopamine. It's free dopamine.
Yeah, the little red circle with the number of notifications. Yeah, is like it keeps you wanting more. But it's like a, how do I say this? It's like a distilled version of a person's life. So you take out all the shit and just leave this like one little picture or a 30-second clip. And I would find myself scrolling through Instagram, and like, there's all these incredibly attractive women or models on there. And it's like, one, where do these girls even exist? Yeah. Because I don't see them. And two,
are they hot?
Yeah, right. And the other thing you see is people put up these stories, and it's like, I've been to events where it was like, let's say a 1 was not very fun and 10 was the most fun I've ever had.
Yeah.
And this was like a 6 or a 5. Like, you just went out with some friends, you had a couple drinks, it was a good time. And then you see the Instagram pictures like 3 days later. And if you weren't there, you would think this was like a 12.
Right.
And it's just...
It's so fascinating.
It's very
also
fake,
to be the one like at the party with the person, and then you see how they post and talk about it, and you're it wasn't even that fun. You know, like,
or people
it's so
who aren't even friends, and it's like, here with my besties, right?
Yeah.
I think you see that a little bit more out of girls than guys.
Yeah.
Not to stereotype.
No, I think that women are more inclined to be fake.
But yeah.
I mean, everyone's fake, don't get me wrong, but I think women, especially with each other, are more inclined to that.
But coming back to the hookup culture thing, I have this like idea that because there are so many people's lives that you can observe on Instagram, or you can go on Hinge or Bumble, and there's an infinite amount of girls that you can scroll through, it always leaves me feeling like there's something better, right? That there's some gold at the end of the rainbow that I can never get to. And I feel like it's elevated my expectations of what I should be getting out of a relationship, especially because you see like these couples who post their like relationships and everything's perfect. I feel like it's elevated my expectations of what a relationship should be beyond what's normal. But then I have these thoughts where I'm like, well, maybe I've just never been in a relationship that's that good, and I just don't know.
Give me an example of like a specific thing that you were like, oh, I could have better than this. Like, not a person, but like a specific, like, oh, this, like, I could be is it like an image thing? Like, oh, I could date somebody with like bigger boobs or something?
No,
or is it like...
No, not really. It's like, because all you see are like happy moments, or like
I should be happy all the time.
I should be happy all the time. We fight sometimes. Or like, you see that in a moment where you're in an argument with your significant other, and you're like, these people, and I know that's such a fucked up way of thinking.
There is nothing more annoying than when, so I recently dated somebody who I was best friends with for 14 years. And it did not work out. And I feel like, and this is my perspective, I'm not going to speak for him, but when we were fighting, it was so fascinating because we would fight, but we were best friends for forever. We always have fought, right? We like literally are argumentative
like that good,
all
like
the
that
time.
best friend argument.
Yeah, just like you fight with anybody who you're close to. That's just literally how it works.
And I mean, I know this is guys on guys, but like the way that I form relationships with men is by shitting on, like we shit on each other all the time.
Absolutely. And that's also my humor. Like that's literally a form of humor. And it's also endearing to me.
Statement.
Yeah. Like when people shit on me, it's literally my love language. For my birthday last year, I wanted a roast. I wanted everyone to roast me on my birthday because I thought it was...
Did that happen?
It didn't, no. But it's going to happen
That would have
eventually.
been a great story.
I know. But like it's a form of, Anyway, when I was in this relationship, this person was like, I can't believe like we're fighting, like we fight all the time. And I was like, first of all, we don't fight all the time. Second of all, like this is literally how we've been the last 14 years. Just because now we're in the context of a new type of relationship, you're focused on like the potential of it.
Why do you think that changed?
I think people have constructs of what they think a relationship is supposed to look like. Yeah. And it's so frustrating.
Do you think people give up too easily now because of the access? Mm-hmm. Like I heard a psychologist talking about this, that there was probably something to the idea that people used to live in small communities where there weren't that many options that kept you being like, well, I like you pretty good, and there's not that many options out there. Yeah. Do you think the idea that it's like, well, I can get on an app tomorrow and meet 30 girls or see at least a picture of them, do you think people are kind of thrown in the towel too quickly? Or do you think we found a good balance between what used to be people not ever getting divorced for any reasons ever, and now it's kind of hit?
I think so. Stasis. When it comes to like that type of stuff, we are like insane. Like going back to what I was saying, like we're a selfish culture, and nature relationships by nature are selfless, right? You cannot be in a relationship with somebody and it work and be selfish. Like there are moments that you're selfish and then you learn and you apologize and you have to like quite literally, it's like the sacrifice of yourself in to have a healthy relationship. That's just how it works. And so when people are selfish, which our culture tells us like you do, like even like these like self-helpy things are like you're the like you don't need no man and like do you and like you need to be obsessed with you, like that whole idea is problematic for certain people because like that's not going to help you build. It's going to help you have standards for who you should let into your life, but it's not going to help you build a relationship with somebody that's lasting, right? And so if you're of the mindset that like I can do better or like I shouldn't have to be with somebody that I fight with or like we should get along perfectly, then you're going to be like, okay, like who's next, right? Like let me just get on my app and find somebody who's next.
Enneagram 3s are very and that's one a problem I feel like I have is I'm always like in my professional life or my personal life, I'm always looking for a way to improve things, right? How do I make this more efficient? How do I make it better? I think I was telling you before the podcast, like I've gotten really into jujitsu, right? Which is like this never ending practice basically of how do I get better at this move? How do I see 5 steps ahead? And I feel like I have this tendency to be like, strive towards perfection. And in a relationship, obviously that's never going to happen. So then the question in my mind always becomes, and I'm aware of this, at least to some degree, what is that balance between this perfection, which you're never going to reach, and this other end where it's like, this clearly isn't working.
So let me ask you, are your parents still together?
Yes.
Okay.
They've been together and they have a great relationship, which is really interesting because like, did
you see them fight growing up?
A little bit. Not a ton. And I've thought of this because they were always like, we tried to keep it kind of behind doors.
Which is interesting.
But I definitely did, like, I don't know if they ever really got in, like, huge fights. But I definitely see, like, I don't know. Let's say we were, like, hosting a New Year's party at my house, right? My parents are, like, getting the house ready, cleaning. And it's like, something happens, right? My mom's like, did you remember to get the table cleaned off? And my dad's, little bickering shit like that like, right. But I never saw anything
like of substance, like of like
knockdown,
like a proper, like, I don't trust you, or this is like
no.
Yeah. Nothing like super emotional.
And I've asked them about it because when I was going through my last relationship, I feel like we were getting in those types that you were mentioning where it was like, it was more like my parents' arguments always seem to be about, and they joke about it too, like, little shit, right? Like,
but they have more arguments than that. You just never saw them. And so your construct for a relationship is like, okay, if we have fights beyond you forgetting to put the table out, then we have a problem, right? And so your standard for a relationship is unrealistic because you saw nothing real, not nothing real, but like there's pieces of the relationship that you weren't exposed to. And that is your prime example of a relationship. Whereas for me, I grew up, my parents literally hated each other, right? Like, and
are they together or are they divorced?
No. But they were together for 20 years. Like they shouldn't have never gotten married, but that's another conversation.
How old were you when they split?
I was 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they got married.
So for all intents and purposes, your whole childhood, it
was just a big fight, the whole thing. I've never seen my parents, like, I'm not kidding you when I say I've never seen I don't know what it looks like for them. Like, I'm uncomfortable in public when I see my friends show PDA towards each other.
Right.
Because my parents never kissed. They weren't happy. They were angry all the time.
So basically the opposite of what I'm describing.
Yes.
Okay.
And so my construct of a relationship is like flipped, right? So what I've learned within my friends and in relationships with men in general, like, people either are very, like, two people who are afraid of commitment or who are really hard on their view of what a relationship should look like, are situations like you, where you don't have this, you have a perfection like your idea
which is
of a
exacerbated by my personality, probably. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, once again, chicken or the egg, right? But
Fair enough.
But like, you have this idea that this relationship needs to be perfect, and it needs, like, we can't fight, and everything needs to be like a-okay. And also, your image of not only the relationship but of your partner probably is like, you have a very high standard probably for what you expect from like a partner. Yeah. Because of that, right? Because your expectations are unrealistic because your prime example was not completely realistic, right? Because you were not shown the whole picture. Whereas mine, I have problems because I'm like, I believe that relationships don't work at all, right? Like, I fundamentally...
So that's like your baseline.
I fundamentally do not believe I'm ever going to find a partner and that I get along with, that I'm ending up with. Like, everything ends in a fight. Everything is broken up eventually. Like, no two people get along. And so when I put someone, for instance, going back to the guy I just dated, when I put him into the relationship box as opposed to, like, when I took him out of the friendship box and put him into the romantic box.
Because friendships you've seen last forever.
Oh yeah. Friendships are great. That, like, he's my family and I trust him and everything is good. And then as soon as he changes roles into, we're now dating. Okay, now
that's
now
a really
all
good.
this
That's
stuff
a really good not experiment too, because you have someone who is in like both of those boxes.
I learned so much about myself, and I hope he did too. But it was just like so fascinating to have somebody that I genuinely trusted, loved, like would do anything for. And like the insecurities that came from that relationship, like I was so confident with him as a friend. I never questioned anything. I was completely myself. And then when you start dating somebody, all of the bullshit that comes with what we're talking about creeped into that relationship. And I was like, oh my God, I've never been insecure around you. I've never cared about what you thought about certain things because I was just true, authentically myself. And now I'm like horrified of all these certain things. I'm afraid of you leaving me. I'm afraid of like not working out. I'm afraid of the way you view me. I'm afraid of all these things that like I never had before with you. And it's like, wow, that's about me, right? Like that has nothing to do with the relationship with you. That's my own shit.
Would you say that 50% of the problems in any relationship are you?
What do you mean? So,
like, I think it's very easy to look at the other person and just blame, not everything, because I think most reasonable people will be like, I got these, like, at least this is how I have felt, where I would be like, yeah, I know I've got like ABC, but like, let's be honest, it's more 75-25. You're the issue.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Is it more?
Well, that's
I think a lot of people feel like that.
It's really fascinating to me because I talk about this a lot with my clients because people are either one of two things, right? They're either very, very inclined to blame themselves for everything, right? They want to take, because there's something that's like the
definitely
control.
Not me.
Yeah. And it's different. It's not, people aren't black and white. So it's not like maybe in relationships you're this way, but in real life or in like work or other things you're not. But generally the way and it has to do with confidence, but generally people are usually, I blame myself for everything and everything's my fault and I am the reason that this happened or didn't happen or whatever. Or they're the opposite where they're like, it's your fault. And they're pointing fingers all the time. They don't take responsibility. And my job a lot of the time when I'm working with a patient or a client or whatever you want to call them, it's me bringing them towards the middle, right? Like, that's not your fault. This is what you can control. This is what you cannot, right?
So I think you just said something really interesting that kind of piqued my mind. You were talking about confidence, or let's call that ego or self-esteem. Maybe, I don't know if those are different, but
yeah.
So, and you said it differs how you take blame or give blame, right? So I'll give you an example. In work settings, I've typically been super confident.
I've experienced that. You
never
are very
had,
confident.
But I don't have any issue if I fuck up taking blame. And I feel like I'm more inclined to take blame for things even when I don't feel like it's totally my fault, because I know I have confidence in my ability to perform.
Right. You are secure in your ability to work.
Yeah. And so if I mess something up, I can be like, I fucked this up. Or if I feel like somebody else messed up, but like it's not worth calling them out, like on a call, maybe I try to bring a little bit of the blame onto myself. In a relationship, for whatever reason, because I'm very confident, I've a good social circle, always been confident with friends, work, never been as confident with women in terms of a relationship.
Why do you think
and
that is?
find myself, let me just finish this and I'll
Okay,
answer
sorry.
that. And find myself much less inclined to take blame for things in a relationship. Why that is, I don't know.
I do. Confidence.
I don't know why I lack the confidence. Going back to your question,
Yeah.
in relationships, where in other aspects of my life, I don't even think about, like, I've never thought like, I wonder if my friends like really like me, or like I wonder if I'm doing well at work. It's like, no, my friends invite me to hang out all the time. They're my friends. I do well in work, or I just got, especially like work or school. Like school especially, super easy to measure, right? Like you either got an A or B or C.
Yeah.
And I always managed to get A's and B's. And so I was like, yeah, I'm good at school, confident.
So tell me this. If say things don't work out with women, specifically like in a relationship, if it doesn't work out, what does that tell you? What is the narrative in your head?
I think it depends on the context. So like that's too broad. I can answer that, but you're gonna have to narrow it down for me.
Okay,
like it depends on why. It depends on why it didn't work out.
Okay, so I'm saying like from your perspective, I am rejected by a female, or this relationship doesn't work out. What does that tell you? Like, what is the narrative in your head?
If they rejected me, if I really like them, usually it's me. If I don't like them that much, I'm just like, whatever. Like it wasn't meant to be. So if there's a girl I really like and I'm attracted to and get rejected by, that's like, I mean, it's biology, right? It's like, yeah, you're a good guy, but I don't like you you're not good enough to like pass your genetics on to the next generation. You're not good enough.
That's the narrative you're
If it's a girl that I don't like that much, it's kind of like, well, I don't really care about your opinion that much anyway.
Right. But that's different. But like fundamentally, what you're afraid of is someone confirming the belief that you're not good enough. That is what you're...
So I've spent a lot of time trying to get over that fear of rejection.
Right. But you are confident in the fact that you're good enough at work. You are not confident in the fact that you are good enough for a relationship or a woman, right? That's the difference.
Sometimes, yeah. But what's funny about it is then once I get into the relationship, it's like there's this where I'm like, you need to pick your game up type thing. Does that make sense? To the other person. Where like I have these very high expectations, but at the same time of them, but also maybe don't feel...
But you're projecting your own insecurity onto them at that point.
Okay, let's dive into that. Elaborate.
Like do you do that at work to people? Like when you start working with somebody, you're like, oh, super excited to work with you. And then do you start like nitpicking how they work? And
no.
Yeah, because you're not insecure at work, right? So like when we project our own insecurities on other people, that's what's happening with you. Like you're like, I don't feel good enough.
And
so
projecting,
you need to, for
people who don't know, can you just explain that a little bit? I feel like most people know, but
like projecting?
Yeah, what is it exactly?
So it's really interesting because like the things that we really like about other people are usually things that we really like about ourselves. And the things that we don't like about other people are usually the things we don't like about ourselves, right? So like when you really don't like somebody, there's probably something in that person that reminds you of you, or reminds you like of something in yourself that you don't like, or something that you don't have.
Is that is it jealousy part of that too? Like when you say it's something you don't have?
That's one way it presents, jealousy. But like, I'm trying to think of somebody I really don't like. So there's like, there's someone that I went to high school that I really don't like. But the reason that I don't like this person, let's tag them.
Yeah.
And the reason I don't like this person is because first of all, they're very similar to me. It's very fascinating. And there's things that they do that I don't like that I do. And I'm like, it takes a while to like really kind of analyze that. Like you have to really be self-aware. Not like I'm calling myself self-aware, but like you have to really understand like, oh, this person's like very confident to the point of like almost like narcissism, and that's kind of how I am, like, and the reasons that I don't, for instance, like the things about my dad that I don't like, the reasons I don't get along with my dad are I'm so similar to my dad. Like we are so similar, and the things that he does that I hate, I know that I do those, right? Like
things that piss you off about somebody in a relationship, is that also true for people you're dating?
What do you mean?
Well, if somebody's, I don't know, let's pick an example. somebody doesn't wash the dishes. I don't know, something stupid, menial. Does that mean I don't wash the dishes very much, or is it like?
No, but
you know
what that tells you, right? Like when someone doesn't do things like that, like you're not upset because the dishes aren't washed. You're upset because you in your mind, the narrative is this person doesn't care about me. This person doesn't think about me. This person doesn't do things. You know what I mean? Because that's like what that means, right? Like is it
that, or that you're just like annoyed that it's dirty, or is it both?
No, it's always deeper than that, right? Like, yeah, it's annoying that things are dirty, but it's like when, like, for instance, like if somebody doesn't pick up after themselves, they didn't think that I would want to, like, they thought I would do this, or like they didn't think that
or like, did they just think it was okay to leave it or not take care of things?
Right. It's like the idea of like, you didn't think about me, you did something without me in mind, and you didn't think it would affect me, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's like the majority of it's communication, right? Like it's a majority of communication issues in relationships or just with people in general. It's like this is my favorite thing to tell my patients when they're learning how to have healthy communication with people is the story, you doing this, the story I'm telling myself is my favorite thing. Like, so the story I'm telling myself is that you don't love me because you didn't clean up after yourself. And that means you didn't think about me.
That's not conscious though, right? Because like I would never, I can't imagine saying that. So like consciously thinking that with the voice in my brain.
Right. You have to train yourself to think like this, right? Okay. But like, when's the last time that you got upset about something, just in general? It doesn't have to be about a relationship, or think about a relationship.
Probably like 3 days ago at work. I don't know.
No, do a relationship. Like one time you got upset in a relationship that you were in. Give me an example.
Okay. We'll go there. So I was in a relationship with a girl, and let's see, this was probably one of the most mad, like this really ticked me off. This was something that happened to the point where I couldn't wrap my brain to understand why they'd done this. So I'm trying to figure out how much of the meat of this story I want to tell. Basically, this person we were invited to a wedding. Her ex was at this wedding, was in the bridal, or was a groomsman, asked that I not come to the wedding. So I got uninvited. That didn't make me that mad. It's kind of like petty. Yeah. So the girl that I was dating at the time was kind of upset because she knew the bride and groom really well. Yeah. And so what she had said was, I'm just going to go to the ceremony, a little bit of the reception, and then like I'm going to kind of leave. Now, if she wanted to stay for the whole thing, like that would have been fine with me. I was like, okay, just like, call me when you want me to come pick you up. And she was like, that's fine. I just want to go for a little bit, and we'll come back and smash Asian food and, drink a glass of wine, go to bed. Sure. Long story short, never calls, never hear from her. Get a call from my friend who was there, his girlfriend, like she's at my house. And it was just like, I couldn't fathom that being that inconsiderate, where it's like, I would have been like, hey, I decided to stay a little longer, or like, so this happened. It was like you don't even give a shit. Like, because by the time I got the call, it was like 2:30 in the morning. Right. Right. We were supposed to meet up at like 9.
Okay. So pretend I'm her.
Yeah.
And tell me the story you're telling yourself. Like, use that phrase. So you not calling me all night. The story I'm telling myself that you don't care. You do not care about me. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, because yes, maybe she's cheating. Maybe she's
and all doing that.
But at the fundamental level, that is, you do not care about me. Right. Yes. Like, that is where all those things amount. Right. You know what I'm trying to say? So like, and that's like why I love that phrase so much, because it not only does it allow you to be vulnerable about because you can sit here and argue about like, you could have called then and the semantics, but at the fundamental level, you are hurt because that told you that she doesn't care about you. Right. Right. And so it gets you to get to that point of being like, I have to realize why this upsets me. Right. So that's really informative to you, but also it's informative to that person. Right. And I think especially when communicating with men, in my life, and there's a book about this, about how men are insanely status driven and women are very connection driven, right? And so when you sit down and you're like, you need to do the dishes more, and
when women say that to men,
like what they hear is, I am not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I have to do things, I have to do, like, very action oriented. Whereas like if you're like, hey, the story I'm telling myself when you don't do the dishes is that you don't think about me usually, like, regularly, like I have to remind you to think about me. And
so is it more helpful for, like, if you are upset about that, for you to frame, like, is this just a question of framing, like how the issue is being brought up? Like, instead of saying, I'm pissed off, like, do the fucking dishes, is it better to bring it up like that? Like you just said, I feel like you don't care about me when you don't.
Right, because I think that a lot of the time what gets lost in translation is like, why are the dishes so important to you? Like, why is this worth fighting over? Why is this that big of a deal? And it's that big of a deal because of the fundamental of it, right? Because, and a lot of these things are like constructs that we learn as a kid, right? So like your parents, so Dax Shepard and who is he married to? Kristen Bell.
Kristen Bell, yeah.
They talk about this. Yeah, that's my baby. That's my baby. Yeah. But they talk about their communication style when they first started dating. Like, she would be sitting on the couch and she'd be like, hey, will you get me a glass of water while you're up? And he grew up in a household where he was taught to be like helpful and stay small and not ask for anything. So her asking, hey, will you do this for me, was not something that he was allowed to do in his head growing up. Like, he was just like trying to make sure he was not a nuisance to his mom. His mom had enough going on. And so he would get offended by her being like, hey, will you get me like a glass of water? He thought that was rude. And like, and they had to have this whole conversation about like, no, my love language is me doing things for you, and I'm allowing you to serve me by doing things for me. I did not know that would upset you, or that,
right?
Because to him, it's like, you're like, that is the antithesis of what you're supposed to do when you love somebody.
So where is the line between, let me figure out how to word this. Where is the line between somebody did something that inadvertently kind of frustrated you or made you feel a certain way, versus, like, there's gradations, right, to what somebody may do to you in a relationship, right? Let's take, like, cheating would be on the very far end. It's like, obviously you knew that would, or I would hope you know that makes me feel like shit if that were to happen.
Right.
Where's the line between like misunderstanding and like, you did kind of fuck up?
So.
And is that different for everyone? Is that just a stake that people have to put in the ground? Because like the dishes thing might be, that's menial, right? That, I think we can all agree that that's something small. Mm-hmm. If it's something bigger, like
where do you draw the line? If this is too big of an issue, we should not be together, kind of thing.
Yeah. Again, like, we'll bring up cheating because that's like an extreme example that like everybody agrees on is fucked up.
Yeah.
Where it's like, now not everybody breaks up after that, but like even the person who does it usually isn't like, well, you know, I was totally justified in doing this.
I think it's about like knowing your partner and like getting to know them in the sense that like, okay, like for instance, the reason people can stay together, in my opinion, after cheating is because they understand what the partner was going through, right? So I, like, for instance, if someone has some sort of a relation, like an identity relationship with, like, I'm trying to think of the best example for this. Like, there is a fine line between this is about you or this is about me or this is about us, right? And when there's an issue in the relationship that you can't both understand that, like, what's going on, right? So sometimes people cheat because the relationship's bad. Sometimes people cheat because they feel neglected by the relationship. Sometimes people cheat because they are personally going through something that has nothing to do with that person, but they needed to, that's how they acted out, right? Like, and being able to understand, I cheated, but it has nothing to do with you, even though it has everything to do with you. That it takes a very healthy communicative relationship and also a very understanding, self-aware secure partner to stay with somebody. Like when people stay together after cheating and for the right reasons, I think it's like
what would
the
be
coolest thing.
What would be the right reasons for that? Because I don't think I could ever see myself staying with someone after that.
Right.
And now,
but
I
you
should take
also
that back. Now, if I feel like, let me take that back. I don't think I could see myself staying with a girlfriend after that.
Yeah.
If it was like wife, married, there's 2 kids, like,
yeah,
let's do it if nothing else for the benefit of like kids are raised better. And if we can like be reasonable in front of them, like it'd probably be better. But outside of that, like what would be a healthy reason for staying together after?
Well, let me ask you, say somebody like cheated you at work, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that you'd be able to like forgive them and move on if they apologized?
No.
Really?
No.
Okay.
I mean, if it was really bad, like,
yeah.
No.
I know that's like a very hard thing to like, I don't even know what example of that would be, but.
Yeah. I mean, let's say you had like a business partner who screwed you over,
yeah.
skimmed money out of the business. Dane Cook's told a story. I heard him on a podcast. Like his brother was you know who Dane Cook is?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
His brother stole like $2 million.
Yeah. I heard
and
about
he was
that.
basically like, you're no longer my brother.
Yeah.
And I was like, I totally vibe with that feeling. Like to me, I have no problem. It's kind of like the don't cast pearls before swine adage, where it's like, if you've done me enough wrong, it's not worth, like, I'll accept your apology, but like, I don't want to put myself in a situation where like this could happen again.
Right.
And so like, you're not really worth it.
Right. Yeah.
Now maybe that's like too harsh, and I have a
reason-
tendency to be pretty like
Yeah.
black and white about things.
Yeah. I think the reason I asked you that is because like going back to the idea of what we were talking about earlier, like you are
Your camera just died.
oh good.
Whatever. We'll keep going.
Like you are secure in work, but like your issue, me asking you about that kind of tells me that your issue with trust is with other people, right? It's like less about like you trust yourself in certain areas, but like when it comes to other people, you don't always trust, right? And so that's kind of why I was asking about work. Like maybe you're more secure in that, but I think the idea of I'm unable to forgive you, I'm unable to move on from this is because of the deep insecurity that you have around not being enough, or like whatever that fundamental issue is that kind of creates insecurity in relationships for you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of like where the baseline is as far as being able to get past that, right? Like being able to be okay with somebody, not okay, but like forgiving and understanding and moving forward, as opposed to being so stuck in that moment and so fixated on what went wrong or you did me wrong, and being able to move past that, you know?
Yeah. Because
them doing that to you confirms that lie you tell yourself is true, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, and that's like a whole
that.
nother topic. Like I could, because we're also attracted, we do this confirmation bias is something that I talk about all the time too with clients, is like we have these stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, right? And so we are attracted to people who confirm our stories. And so sometimes we get into relationships with partners that we shouldn't, because
we want to know that they're gonna.
I am attracted to people who I know won't work out with, because I fundamentally believe I will not be with somebody that it will work out with, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just like, and I've done a lot of work on that and I've gotten a lot better, but yeah, I'm fundamentally attracted to people who it won't work out with, because I'm confirming this bias I have, like subconsciously, right?
Right.
That it won't, and it's fascinating. We do that with good things and bad things in our psyche.
Yeah. Yeah. Throwing a lot at me here, Jeri. No, that's certainly interesting. And yeah, I do find that interesting about that you're looking for. I have had moments in relationships where I'm like, see, I knew it.
Yep.
Like I was right. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Because you're like, okay, well,
how do you?
I knew it was gonna end. I knew this wasn't gonna work out. I knew I was gonna die alone. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
how does one avoid that trap?
I think you would.
They go to your website.
Yeah,
and
you go to.
you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Go to my Instagram and let me know when you want to work with me. No.
Right.
I think it really does like come down to, you have to understand the lies you're telling yourself to be able to catch yourself doing that, right? So you have to really understand, and that's something that I'm still learning those fundamental beliefs. Like, I think we continue to do that our whole lives, right?
Right.
They're formed at such a young age, and it's so normal for us to believe what we believe, right? Like, if your whole life has been surrounded by this crappy relationship that your parents had, like, that's all you know until you're told different, right? And so that's with any fundamental belief. So if you aren't exposed to something that actually works, you're not going to believe that it is a reality possible, right? And so as we go through life experiences, meet new people, take on new things, like, you start to realize, oh, not everybody thinks like this. Not everybody believes that. Some people don't struggle with this like I do, right? So that comes out in therapy, but it also comes out in relationships. Like, and that's another thing that I've realized is that a lot of people, I think it's so fascinating that people are like, I'm not ready for a relationship, or like, I'm like working on myself now because I'm not good in relationships. The only way to heal relationship problems is to be in a relationship and heal them, right? Like, you cannot heal, like, yes, you need to be able to be secure.
But you need that. Yeah.
You need to be able to be secure and like trust yourself and love yourself and understand the patterns going on in your head. But at the end of the day, my relationship problems and the insecurities I have in a relationship will never be solved. They will never be solved until I am in a relationship and am able to work on them.
Now, you do need some time when you get out of a relationship, right? To like get back. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, some people, not everybody. I guess people are different.
I think it depends on the person, obviously. But like, I think people who jump from relationship to relationship, like, that's a whole nother conversation. But like, there's insecurity about being alone, or like fear of whatever. Like, everyone's got their own like narrative. But at the end of the day, like, and I'm not in a place right now where I should be in a relationship like today. Like, as of right now, in this moment, I should not be in a relationship because I have work that I want to work on myself. But if I was
Isn't that what you were just saying you should avoid, though?
Well, but I'm focusing
right.
No, I know you're right, but like, the reason why is mainly because I'm still like hung up on the last person I dated. So it's not fair for me to be dating anybody else right now.
Right.
But me being able to, like, I'm not working on healing my relationship trauma. I'm working on healing my own insecurity trauma, right? Or my own narrative in myself. And I need to feel good and know what I deserve and feel healthy before I can let somebody else in. And then the things that I'll work on, or the things that will come up, and are going to be completely different things than the stuff I'm working on my own right now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That makes sense.
So it's like, there's all, like, if you want to like lay out everybody's problems, like, you know, we're going to have insecurities about relationships and family and what like work is and what, like, all these different things. Like, I'm just choosing to focus on these right now. I will eventually get to this, but I'm not in a place where I want to deal with that right now. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think it's really frustrating going back to this idea of like, every relationship, you can't fight with your partner, or like all these things. It's like, everybody has this. Everybody has these insecurities or problems in relationships, and like, it's like about finding a partner who's willing to like dig into that with you and like get to know you, and also understand like the lies that you tell yourself, the insecurities, like see the real deal and be like, okay, this is not true. This is true. This is where we need to work. This is like, and being able to be vulnerable enough with that person to where you're both able to like show your full hand of cards and be like, okay, this is who I am, and these are like all the crazy thoughts that I have and all the things that I like believe, and some of it is absolutely insane, but I'm here for you, and like I also want to see your hand, and like, you know, it takes a very special type of a relationship. And a lot of relationships don't even get to that, right? Like, a lot of people don't even get to that level of vulnerability, and they don't truly know their partner or the beliefs that their partner has, right? They just never get to that depth, which scares me.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that like, are you talking about even couples who have been married for a long time?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a whole nother thing. There's a lot of people who just fundamentally do not know who they're married to. Yeah.
Well, Jeri, this has been an awesome conversation. I really, really appreciate you coming on. Yeah. Also for dissecting all of my oddities and giving me a little therapy of my own, which I clearly need. Okay, so where can people find you if they want to know more? How can they get in touch?
Yeah, so my website is mindfulmeetupscompany.com.
Okay. You're out of Atlanta, but it's virtual.
Yeah, I'm virtual right now because of COVID and everything. My Instagram is Mindful Meetups Co.
Okay.
And yeah, that's really how you find me.
Well, thanks so much for being my first guest.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
I'm so excited for your journey with
Going away. Cheers.
Yes.
Thank you.